Hello, folks. My speech is already too long, but Randy reminded me I have two stories I got to tell. I got to tell my own Jack Helber umpire story. Coaching a whitefish with him at the Glacier Twins, and there's one umpire there that they were always butting heads. And sure enough, and he always told us, hey, if I get thrown out and I'm out there too long, one of you has to come get me. My brother was his other assistant coach. So we would alternate who had to go retrieve Jack from home plate. And this particular day, Willie, the umpire, makes a terrible call. Helps goes out there, does his thing, and gets ejected and won't leave. So my brother looks at me and says, your turn. So out I go to home plate, and I'm trying to get Helps back towards the dugout. And Willie makes the mistake of saying, Helps, you have 30 seconds to get off of this field. Well, you guys that know Coach, 30, 29, 28. And he turns at about 15 seconds, and he goes past the dugout, and he's counting at the top of his lungs the whole way. And he gets, we had an office down past the dugout, and at about 3, he hits the office door and slams the door, and the whole stadium, because he left at 3, and we all know he's not leaving at 3, right? And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And dramatic, he loved the Paul Harvey when he announced the Paul Harvey dramatic pause. And we wait, and finally the door opens back up, and he goes, "One!" and slams the door one more time. The other story I have to tell real quick is the coaches conference. It was the first year I went with Helber was in Nashville, and my brother and I went out downtown Nashville, and hit the strip up. And we went to this one bar that had $2 PBRs. And so we're like, hey, this is great, a couple of broke college kids. So we sit at this bar, well, they had this fan in the back, and the fan kept rotating towards us, and we're just a couple of hicks from Montana, right? But I look at my brother and I say, doesn't that smell like marijuana to you? And he goes, yeah, kinda, but they have $2 PBRs, so we're not leaving, right? So we hang out there a little bit longer. We get back to the motel, like Coach Town said, Helps is up at 8 for the very first speaker, and we come stumbling down, and I sit down next to Coach, and we're an hour and a half late to the sessions in the morning, and he looks at me and he goes, Jesus Christ, Kel, bring you all the way down here to Nashville, and you're not going to learn a thing because you're hopped up on marijuana the whole time. So those are my 2 extra stories I had to get in there. So I'm Kelly Morford. I'm from Miles City, Montana. I coached for Helber, or I played for Helber my last year of Legion baseball, and then coached with him in Miles City, and then in Whitefish, like I said, and then he came to coach with me in Libby, Montana there. And I just want to thank Charlie and his whole crew for putting this on, and also I have a player here, Will Reichel, that came down from Montana with me. I want to thank him for coming with us, but I'm just excited that I can give you guys a bit of perspective from the Montana side, so that I know a lot of you have been to Montana with Coach and played with him there and did the road trips. We were kind of on the other side of it, me being from Miles City and coaching with him there. And I want you guys to know that the family that he has here in Claremont, he has the same family in Montana as well. So I know he has a long history here, but he's made the same impact in the state of Montana and all the places he's been, just like he has here, and we're grateful for that. As far as being from Miles City, like I said, you guys came to the Newhouse tournament, but growing up in Miles City, I had a different perspective on the Newhouse. And believe it or not, growing up as a baseball player in Miles City, Montana, you idolize the Claremont Cardinals. And you guys that played there would know that you would probably see people you never knew show up to your games in Claremont Cardinals hats, right? And the Newhouse tournament, for those of you who don't know, was was a premier tournament of the region for a long time. We had teams from California, Washington, Texas, Oregon, from even like somebody said before, Taiwan. And it was really the highlight of our summer in Miles City to host all of these teams, and as a young baseball player growing up, we idolized you guys and we idolized these teams. It was like big leaguers coming into our town. I think the only people who might have idolized you guys more were the high school girls in Miles City there, but I won't tell that story because some of you are here with your wives. So. But I have heard the stories, by the way. The people of Miles City were always fans of their hometown Mavericks first, but they also had an adopted team. Like I said, would buy their hats and cheer them on during the tournament. And as a kid, if you were lucky enough to be selected, you got to work as a ball boy and bat boy, and that was like you won the lottery. You got paid in cheesy hot dogs and snow cones, and got a shirt. And if you were lucky enough to draw that game, you got to be a bat boy for the Claremont Cardinals. And it was a big deal. We thought we were in heaven. And I just tried to paint this picture to you guys because I want you to know that Jack Helber, before he even came to coach there, was really an institution and a legend in Miles City, Montana. And the Claremont Cardinals were as well. And it's because of your guys' success in the tournament and the California mystique. But mostly it was because of Jack Helber. And I remember watching them as a kid in the Newhouse tournament, thinking to myself how cool it would be to play for a coach like Jack Helber. And his fate works in crazy ways. And when Helbs retired from teaching here in Claremont, somebody said our coach had quit. We looked for a new coach, and they said, well, let's call Jack Helber and see if he'll come up and coach us. And we thought they were crazy, but they make a phone call, and lo and behold, Helbs agrees to come up and be our coach. And we knew that we had hit the jackpot, and we couldn't be more excited. And I'm glad that you brought up that story earlier, because he flew up to meet with us the first time, and in the off season to kind of get a game plan for what we're going to do going into the season. And the very first question that was asked of him by a player was from me. And you know what I asked him? Can we do the phantom infield? The part of that phantom infield that I wanted to add is that he told me that story, and he told me that he tried to do it in Rapid City, but Coach, at the end of the day, being a guy that played the game the right way, went over and asked the coach from Rapid City, hey, can we do this phantom infield? And that guy said, no, you can't. But then the coach, when you guys played in Miles City, let him do that phantom infield and agreed. So I thought that was obviously a testament to how Coach Helber enjoyed the game, but also held it in such a high regard. So I liked baseball before Helbs was my coach, but I learned to love it because of him. He completely transformed the way that us kids in Miles City, Montana knew and understood the game. And really, I was thinking about it on the way down here. We won a lot of games the year that he coached me and coached my team simply because the other teams were out-coached. And the amount that he elevated American Legion baseball in Montana, because these other teams saw what we were doing because of Coach Helber, he had a great impact on the sport, not just in the towns that he coached in up there, but in the state as a whole. And I think that's a great testament to him as a baseball coach, obviously. So even though he pinch hit for me way too often, that was the best summer of my life playing for him. I was like, in the movie Major League, when Roger Dorn won't look in the dugout when they're trying to pinch run for him. That was me in the on-deck circle quite a bit. But we played what felt like 300 games and traveled a million miles. They told Coach, we want you to bring your system from Claremont up to Montana. We want you to do what you did down there up here. And part of his mantra, as you guys know, is we'll play anybody, anytime, anywhere. Well, we played a doubleheader in Butte, Montana at 5 o'clock one night. Dropped the doubleheader, but that's neither here nor there. got on the bus, drove 400 miles home, and got up the next day and played another doubleheader at noon. So coaches play anybody, anywhere, anytime mantra needed to be tweaked a little bit for the vastness of Montana, but nonetheless, we loved it. We were playing every day and going, and Brownie, you were there, you know, we were on that bus, and as players, and you guys know how it goes when you're playing with your friends in the summer. You wanted to be at the baseball field or on the bus headed to the next one, and it was really the best time of our lives. Of all of his baseball accomplishments, Helbs was most proud of his road trips, which we've heard a lot about, and he did that for us in Miles City as well. We took a western swing into Canada, and well as trips to the College World Series. And Helbs always told stories about how crazy other coaches thought he was for loading you guys up when he first started his Claremont trips on that rickety old bus and heading north. But he knew how great of an experience those road trips were for the young men that he coached. And I think the thing that we didn't realize at the moment was that most of our fondest memories weren't from what happened on the baseball field, but what happened in between them and getting there, and the shenanigans and the adventures and the history lessons and the stories that we won't tell anybody else. But Coach Helber knew that, and I think, you know, he enjoyed those road trips more than we did, even because he knew that he was providing something that we would cherish really for the rest of our lives. I was lucky enough to share a field with Coach one last time this past summer, thanks to the fact that Charlie and the rest of the Claremont, Brownie, they were the Claremont Cardinals, not the Wolf Pack last year. They brought the Cardinals back. And they brought him on another northern swing, and that included a stop in Libby. And that was a special moment for me, and I thank Charlie and everybody else that made that happen, because that obviously turned out to be Helbs' last northern swing road trip, and I can't think of a better way for it to happen than it being with the Claremont Cardinals, and I'm going to cherish those memories of playing you guys and being on the field with Helbs one last time last summer. I'm also grateful that Helbs was able to continue his love for coaching back here in Claremont for the last couple of years. He was going as strong as ever, calling me up, gushing about his next young middle infielders that he had coming up. And it never took long for Coach to get excited about the next guy and the next season, and he just got so excited about what he was doing down here with his current teams. And I just wanted to say thank you to you guys for that as well, because I know that these last couple of years he's really enjoyed that. I learned so much about baseball and life from Coach. Never been around someone who loved the game and his players as much as he did, yet a knack for finding the perfect balance of giving us the freedom to be kids and have fun while also being serious students of the game and learning how to play it the right way. The older I get and coach my own teams, I understand how unique of a quality that is. And I knew I wanted to be a baseball coach after I played one season with him. And like he did for so many other young men, he gave me a chance and started my coaching career. I can count on one hand the number of men in this world that have had the impact on me that Jack Helber has. He was always on the lookout to find the next ball player that was going to turn into a coach. We were lucky enough to have a couple Cali boys and Darren Williams and Justin Brown come up to Miles City, and I still call those two friends today. And Brownie, by the way, that one Walmart dig, that hurt, man. In Montana, if you have a Walmart, you have it made, let alone more than, I didn't even know towns could have more than one Walmart. And two McDonald's? That was a big deal in Montana, man, so take it easy there. Helbs had a lot of success in his coaching stops in Montana, despite the fact that he and Darren had to down a six-pack after our first practice that they witnessed, and Darren about lost his mind because he said, "What are we doing here in Montana?" But of course they lined us out. We qualified for the state tournament that first year with a young team. And the next year, like Brownie mentioned, in 2001, Helbs had what he often called one of his top 3 teams of all time. Maybe he just told me that or told you all that, but he often referred to that as one of his best teams. And they hit over 50 home runs that year, ended up 3rd at state, but the highlight was when they won that Bill Newhouse tournament. And that was one of his most memorable accomplishments. The hometown boys were usually the lovable losers in that tournament, but in 2001 they made the championship game. I thought you were going to steal this story from me, so I'm glad you did. They made the championship game, and they were playing a team called the Seattle Shockers. And these guys were a bunch of assholes. The whole tournament, I'm sure they were stacked with 18, 19-year-old travel, you know, they were really talented, but after every game, they would chant, "Our house, our house, our house, our house." Well, as you know, that didn't sit well with Coach Helber. So, and he always loved his little gimmicks, right, to reach the players and send a message. So he got one of the players and said, "Hey, I need some help. I need this song burned onto a CD." So the kid ran home and burned the song on the CD, brought it back, and they took it up to the press box, and they told the guy running the sound system before the game to play RESPECT, because those guys were not going to disrespect us on our field. In a true Helber fashion, he knew these guys could mash, right? So he, instead of starting their number 3 starter that they had ready to go, he brings out his shortstop, little Andy Anderson. And he told Andy, "You're on the hill." And Andy's like, "I haven't pitched all year." And he said, "You're up today, and if you throw one fastball, I'm going to jerk your ass out of the game." So Andy threw his 45-mile-an-hour fastball all game. He put the outfielders in the gap, and those guys hit. If you guys played in Miles City, it's 438 to center field, right? And those guys hit probably 15 outs that game that were 380 feet or longer, but they had the outfielders out there, and Miles City won their first and only Bill Newhouse tournament in 2001. And I know a lot of you had probably heard that story before because Coach loved to tell it, but I promised the boys back home that I would get that in there for them. Helps had 2 kind of family vacations. If you went somewhere, he's probably visiting his brother Bill or spending time with brother Bob and Mary in Utah. To Bob and Mary, their daughters Jennifer and Elizabeth, and the rest of your family, I want you to know that Helps often talked about how much he loved you all and how much he appreciated spending time, and especially the holidays with you. Of course, an old bachelor like Jack was always ready to get home. But I can say that there's 3 things on earth that made Coach Helber the happiest: baseball, a free meal, and spending time with you guys. The rest of his vacations were spent out on the road with his other family's ball players. Helps loved Montana, but he could never reconcile the fact that we couldn't just jump in our car and go down the street to a Dodger game or an Angels game. So what did he do? He loaded us up in Montana, these Montana boys, and he took us on road trips. And he took us on road trips to Minnesota and Wrigley Field and Brewers games and out to Seattle, and loaded kids up and flew out to the east and hit Fenway and Yankee Stadium, and his favorite park, which was Three Rivers. He loved that stadium. And he took that pro game to us because we all know that he always said the best way to learn the game is to watch the professionals do it. And you go to the game and you pick out the guy that's playing your position and you don't take your eyes off him. So he took that experience of those major league games and he took us so we could experience that. And if he wasn't touring the nation's ballparks, he was on the road. Somebody mentioned before how many weddings that he's been to. Like the guy, I couldn't even venture to guess how many weddings he went to or how much money he spent getting there. But he was important to those young men, and he knew it was important that he was there. The thing about Helms was that he always stood up for his players. He never lost sight of the fact that they were the most important thing. As I continued my coaching career and became a head coach, I realized how easy it could be to lose sight of that when you have so many things to look after as a head coach. But Helms was always there to defend the players, and as a head coach, it could be infuriating at times. And I remember, I would be upset at a player, but there was Helms defending him to the bitter end because that's what he did. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from Helms that I still carry with me was when I was his assistant coach in Whitefish, and we had this kid, and he was our best arm, but he had a terrible home life, and he just wasn't reliable. And he wouldn't show up. He'd be scheduled to pitch, and he wouldn't show up, and he'd leave us high and dry. And Helps gave him another chance, but it got to the point to where he lost the team, and Coach had to kick him off. And that was the end of it. The guy was our best arm, and it hurt us. Well, the next season comes along, and I show up. I would go out there after I was done with college ball, and I show up, and this kid's on the field. And Helps, what's he doing here? Well, he's on the team. After he did what he did to us last year, and you're letting him back on the team, and he told me something that I carry with me as a teacher and a coach to this day, and he said, Kel, you can't hold the mistakes of a 16-year-old kid against him, and we have to give him a second chance. And he said, don't you ever forget that. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned from Coach Helber is he loved those players so much, and he was a guy that gave him a second chance and let them prove himself. And I've heard other stories about how he let kids do that in the Claremont Cardinals, and those kids turned out to be some of his best ball players, and he was always really proud of that. Another special coaching trait that Helps taught me was that as a coach, if you're going to keep a kid on your team, you had to find him a role and clearly communicate that role to the player. It was his way of making every player feel important. The kid may not be a starter, may not play a bunch, but if he was your bunter, when it's time to get a sack bunt down, you called his number. If he was your pinch runner, when that situation come up, you called his number. And Helber stuck by that, and everybody had a role, and everybody felt like they were part of the success of the team because of that. And they had a sense and a purpose on the team, and that's something as well that I've carried forward with me. His approach to coaching the game was different than anybody else that had come along. He wanted to teach us the game to the point where we could make those decisions out there. He didn't want us relying on the coaches and relying on the bench when we were out there playing the game. He wanted to teach us the situations and teach us how the game works so we could play the game when we were out there. That's why he didn't give steal signs. He gave the green light. Everybody give the green light sign. Yeah, you guys know it. He knew that that's how we would learn to love the game, and he was right. And like I said before, when he came to Miles City, he completely flipped the script in how we understood the game, and really it changed my life and made me want to be a coach. The thing about Helps is that baseball was his life, and he treated his ball players literally like family. He dedicated almost every waking moment to the young men he coached. He gave a great deal of credit to his mom, Clara, for his love of baseball. When he was young, he once told her he wanted to get a job, and she said, no, you play baseball, you have your whole life to work. I know sharing a joy for the game and going to Dodger Stadium with her were memories that he cherished forever. Helps' perfect day was practice, extra ground balls after. By the way, I was going to tell Kenny, Helps wasn't mad that they were late. He was mad because you guys had an early game and he couldn't go to breakfast. But his perfect day was practice, extra ground balls after, grab a lunch with a few of the boys, probably the second baseman. He loved his middle infielders. And then if they wanted some more ground balls to take some swings, he was there to do that as well. End the day with a ball game on TV and a glass of CGM, and that was his perfect day. As you can tell, it could go on forever, but I'll share one more story that I think personifies Helps perfectly. And as I mentioned before, Charlie brought the Claremont Cardinals up to Libya this summer. They beat us, I think, 12-0. The umpires screwed us. I got to tell one more story before I tell that story, then we'll be done, I promise. In that game, there's one of those bobble, overthrow things, and it's like, where do the runners go? And the one team wants their runners to go all the way to third, and then, it's the big argument. Well, the umpires position the runners, and Helps is over there booming in the dugout because he thinks that the guy should get another base. And you're like, what's he saying over there? It doesn't make any sense. Well, he's yelling, and pretty soon Charlie comes out. He talks to the umpire very calmly. But he has a little back and forth with the umpire, and they finally get it sorted out. And after the game, I said to Charlie, I said, that was kind of a stretch trying to get an extra base there, wasn't it? And Charlie goes, no, I totally agree, but Helps was so upset if I didn't go out there and argue with the umpire, he was going to yell at me. And I did not want that. I totally know what you mean, man. But back to the moral of the story. I'll wrap up here. Helps came up to, like he did so often, we had a former player that was getting married in August, and he came up to Libby to go to that wedding. And in that game when we played Claremont, we had a 14-year-old kid that was playing shortstop for us. And if you guys know Helps, he always gave the speech, age doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how old the kid is. And whenever I was around Helber, and somebody said something about a player being too young, and I don't know if he's here today, I've never met the guy, but I've heard his name literally a million times, because when somebody would say a ball player is too young, I'd be like, oh no, because I knew Helber was going to go, age doesn't matter. Jorge Paz played for me when he was 14 years old, and I think by the time it was done, is Jorge here? Yeah. I think by the time it was done, that Jorge Paz was like 7 years old when he was playing for Coach Helber, but every time it was the same story. But I knew he would like this kid because he's a middle infielder and he's young and he had potential. So of course, after the game, Helps is bragging about his middle infielders and how much he loves them. And he says, hey, what about that kid that was playing for you? I'm like, yeah, we're excited about him. He's 14, he's young, and age doesn't matter. And he's like, that kid's gonna be good, I can tell. So fast forward to August, we're getting ready for this wedding, and I'm driving out of town to go out to where the wedding is to help set up, and I look over into our baseball field, and there's 2 people out there. And I was like, who's on the baseball field? What's going on here? But then I didn't have to look twice because I knew. And Coach Helber came to Libby, Montana, found this 14-year-old kid that he had never met, didn't coach, tracked him down and got him out to the baseball field, and him and that 14-year-old kid were out there taking ground balls. And when I came back into town 2 hours later, they were still out there. And I think that just sums up Coach Helber in a nutshell, because he was always just excited to work with the next guy and was always willing to help those guys out. He really identified those kids that had a spark for the game. I'm forever indebted to Jack Helber for getting me into coaching baseball. I'm forever grateful that Helms was able to come join with the Libby Loggers for 12 seasons. We enjoyed our most successful years with him there, the 5 state tournament berths and a few district titles. I'm grateful that he was able to bond with my son, who calls him Uncle Applejack, for them to share their love of baseball together, that he got to get some ground ball lessons with Helms in the backyard. I'm grateful that when I tell stories about Jack Helber, that my son will know who he is. But mostly I'm simply grateful that the kids in Miles City, Whitefish, and Libby, Montana got to experience baseball with this man. As an 11-year-old boy at the Newhouse tournament in Miles City, Coach Helps came into my life as a legendary figure. 28 years later, he left it the same way. Thank you, Helps. We love you. And oh yeah, holy moly!